This video is dedicated to my 21-year love affair with Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, which started this evening 21 years ago, January 16th, 2005, exactly 2 months after the game's release. I'll leave it for you to decide whether I'm an OG or not, but if Bloodlines is the story of the flawed gem of a masterpiece that Troika made and a community saved, well, I got to be there before we saved it. I didn't buy Bloodlines at first. I borrowed it from a friend. Sorry, Rosa. Sorry, Troika. Honestly, I was surprised to see the box on my friend's desk hutch. Bloodlines was not robustly advertised. I'd only ever seen one advertisement for it some 6 months prior, a coming soon advert that announced it as the spiritual successor to VTM Redemption. Spiritual successor because publishers were always playing fast and loose with that term. Redemption was a 2000 release, the first VTM PC game, a Diablo-like with graphics and an experience that were fine for the time, though the companion AI lives infamous in my memory, and just thinking about it causes my blood pressure to spike. But it was the only VTM game in existence until Bloodlines came along, and just like now, the allure of more VTM was always strong, and I couldn't wait to get more of that clunky, infuriating goodness in my hands so I could get it home and straight into my veins. But of course, a Redemption successor, Bloodlines, was not. About the only thing they have in common beyond their shared IP is both games have a character named Mercurio.
What? How comes thou here? Flee now, and the great Mercurio will not smite thee.
Mercurio, if that's what you mean. Oh, shit, you're a Malkavian, aren't you? Damn, that's the last thing I need.
And there's a bit of VO overlap, with Mary Elizabeth McGlynn, VO for Redemption's Ekaterina the Wise.
Get thee to the prince, and tell him that this night, Ekaterina the Wise awakens another into darkness.
Returning to voice Bloodlines Pisha.
My birth name I tell no one. You may address me as Pisha. Pisha was the name of my companion and lover in a time before my death.
So I wasn't going to get more Redemption, but I was about to experience something truly wonderful. After I got it home, installed, and running, I took my personality test and created my character, and off I went into the world of darkness. And for 13 curious, confusing, interesting, and bug-free minutes, until suddenly I couldn't equip my fists, because I had no fists to equip. So I went looking for a patch. Back then, you had the Tim Kaine 1.1 or the Dan Upright patches. The latter is the precursor to the modern Unofficial Patch that West 5 and company have updated for almost 21 years. Hey, happy early 21st, Wesp and team, and thanks. So I availed myself to the patches at the time. I got through the tutorial. God, I fucking hate this part, and I'm not so fond of this one either, if we're being honest. And then I got into Santa Monica. And as I stepped out from the alleyway and started talking to characters and poking around spokes, my mind was blown. I'd never encountered anything so atmospheric, narratively rich, well-scored, and immersive that it rivaled worlds imagined in my head while playing text-based roleplay mods. You know, there are only a few NPCs walking around, but the place felt lived in, and Santa Monica felt like a character. This game is still damn pretty today, especially in parts. I mean, not you, but generally. Through 2004 eyes, minus the modern reso and texture updates, it was even more so. And I can't say enough about the narrative experience and design. First-person narrative perspective, silent protagonist that you built yourself, fully written dialogue. It was in a league completely its own, which says nothing of the multiple scripts, skill or clan or discipline-based dialogue options. All the games we might now compare it to, the later Fallouts, later Elder Scrolls, Outer Worlds, all of those came later. They were influenced by Bloodlines. Sadly, there aren't enough of them today, and most of them are from the same group of people who have spread out from Interplay and Black Isle over the years. But Bloodlines was first, and in my biased opinion, remains the best. Influential to later games, but by no means duplicated. Kudos aside, the game had a ton of issues. Now and then I'll hear from someone who claims to be a launch day Bloodlines player who played start to finish without any issues. I'll take their word for it. Though if they played and finished around launch day, they were not playing as Nosferatu, because the game launched with a bug that prevented you from completing the game as Nosferatu. For my part, I experienced a lot of issues, mostly crashing the desktop, and for me it was pretty common while loading into different spokes. Crashing the desktop was not a casual event, and while you can run this on any old toaster now, back then the graphics were optimized for shit, especially when it came to visual effects, most notorious among them the resource-intensive blue flame. This could stun lock your computer, which wasn't so much of an issue in Ocean House, but was a real problem at King's Way, as the little guys zerged you into oblivion. The mem leak bug that still haunts us today could completely corrupt and ruin your game in progress. And if you had access to the console to resolve the issue or issues, you probably didn't know the console could get you through it, much less have the right commands to get the job done. And then there was the skill issue. The game was not easy. And beyond that, I absolutely sucked. I died everywhere. I've spent 15 or 16 of these last 21 years watching or reading people Let's Play Bloodlines, many of them for the first time, and I've seen many a player understandably struggle with this game, figuring out the combat and the disciplines, or struggling against the game's quirks or limitations, the finite cash and XP resources chief among them, with or without blood heal depending on the patch they were using. But never have I seen anyone who played as badly as I did back then. Despite the skillless play, I eventually got to Act 2, and I think it was around the Elizabeth Dane where I experienced an unresolvable repeated crash to desktop. I was stuck, and I couldn't progress forward, and it would be 16 months before I finally could. For me, the story of Bloodlines will always be what happened over those 16 months. I had a borrowed copy of a game with an unresolvable crash, so I returned it to my friend who had no particular advice. Some days later, I was thinking about Santa Monica, how amazing it felt to experience, and I wanted to play it again, unresolvable crash or no. So I went out and bought a copy for myself, the way you do when a game is broken for you and won't stop crashing, right? And over the year and a half, I kept playing the parts that I could with different characters and concepts until summer 2006. When I was inexplicably past the crash point, I had no idea what had changed. Whether it be a new game or OS patch remains a mystery. All I know is that playing 1/3 of a game, Bloodlines better third if we're being honest, but playing it at retail price always felt so justified, because no other game had ever hit like this one did. And for a seasoned role player who had tasted the immersion of mudding and mudding gone graphic, a single player experience pulling this off was no small feat. Even with the crashes and the unresolved issues, the experience through and despite the limitations and roadblocks was still very much one worth having. And while the rest of the game paled in comparison to those earlier moments, when I eventually finished Bloodlines and watched Venture Tower's penthouse floor explode, sending debris raining onto downtown LA, the credits rolled and I was left feeling so satisfied. Few games of the time were so laden with choice and painstaking anticipation and accommodation of player decisions. And there aren't so many of those now. But with Bloodlines, it was true right away. My treatment of Mercurio will decide whether I have a game-long informant and weapons supplier or my first boss encounter. If I want, I can be nice to Mercurio, but then rat fuck him to LaCroix and he'll be gone from the game forever. Because for some reason, the prince is taking the fledgling's word for it. And if I killed Mercurio already, they anticipated that too. I got to decide whether Heather lived or died. And then whether she lived or died. I don't romanticize the fledgling's relationship with Heather. It's purely master-servant. She is literally a slave to the blood bond. And LaCroix, your dialogue choices are remembered throughout the game. If you're outright disobedient, he keeps things on rails by dominating your ass into compliance, though he'll lament your disagreeability at points throughout the game. Whereas if you're obedient, he'll reward you with an apartment or cash. There are also short-term consequences. Like, do you help Boris kill Venus for a one-time payment? Or do you help Venus kill Boris for payments over time and silent co-ownership of Confession? And there's fluffier consequences, like if you're sweet to VV and do all of her tasks as instructed, specifically not killing David Hatter, she falls in love with you and sends you occasional love letters by email. And over and throughout the game, my dialogue decisions and treatment of various factions and their members dictates who I side with in the midnight hour, or I guess more accurately, who I can't side with, if I choose to side with anyone. So don't ever let anyone tell you that this is a game where your decisions only matter at the end. They mattered throughout. Some of them you only get to see at the end, on your way to one of 6 brief but satisfying endings. Over time, and especially in the last 3-4 years, I've heard plenty of criticisms, one specific to the lack of customization. A lot of those criticisms are anachronistic, complaining about the lack of Fallout 4-esque character detailing in a 2004 game. But I will grant you, Bloodlines had fewer customization options than Morrowind's Pick Ahead, or even Fallout's Name, Age, Sex options a decade prior. You got name and sex, and that was it. And I don't even know if you can really count sex as an option, because it's not so much that you're customizing a character as you are picking a different one. But I'll take it further still. Depending on the clan you pick, you may not have an original model. You may have a stock clan model, and you may start the game kneeling by a version of yourself as they execute your sire and then prepare to do you. You may end up fighting yourself during the blood hunt or beyond. Never once in 21 years have I cared, much less felt like my character wasn't my own self-insertion into the world of darkness. By this point in the game, I had well imprinted on my character and their concept as being mine and distinct from these identical models. And when I polled you all a couple years back, you reported that you felt the same way. Customization options exist now, and I want people to have them, on top of robust build options to personalize your experience. But it goes to show you how much a role player's imagination can take over when given the room to do so. Because fundamentally, all you need for a character to be truly yours is the initial suggestion that it is, followed by a subsequent and consistent lack of contradiction. And Bloodlines had that in spades. The social skill build options were not evenly implemented. After a point, if you invest in intimidation, my opinion, but you're wasting XP. Persuasion is king. But despite that limitation, the combination of clan disciplines and dialogue like presence, dominate, demontation, along with 7 scripts with unique clan dialogue and humanity-specific dialogue options, they all go incredibly hard in providing a personalized experience. This alongside quirks like Ventrue getting a higher level of dominate than Tremere, which I always thought was a balancing decision, but I guess has been deemed a bug, and it's now going to be resolved in an upcoming unofficial patch, 21 years later. As soon as I started playing, I found a community of folks who felt just like me and saw Bloodlines as an experience worth saving and savoring despite its flaws. During the latter part of the aughts, there were some 5 bug fix patches circulating for Bloodlines. West 5's was the most controversial because initially it was only the plus patch, and some folks felt very strongly about including cut content from the game or including fan-made content like Night at the Library because it deviated from what they felt was the developer's vision. Though I'll hasten to note that none of the restored or fan-made stuff was ever mandatory. To be fair, it is the kind of concern that you might have 5 years out, but perhaps not 10 or 15 years out. Once the unofficial began to include the basic patch option, all of that pretty much fell away. And of course now UP is the go-to for patching. A version of it is even included in the GOG digital distribution. Towards the end of the aughts, MV and Laniska gave us Anti-Tribu mod, which they developed and improved for like 7 years. It completely revamped the game. Though I have to admit I never actually played it myself, here's what it did. Holy fuck. In 2019, 15 years post-release, Burgermeister gave us the final released version of Clan Quest mod. A completely different Bloodlines experience with a more accurate humanity system, East LA, a totally new area, with fan voice-acted characters and quests and new endings, and of course, Diablerie. And in just the last 5 years, there have been literally hundreds of new mods added for this game on Nexus Mods. There are even whole sub-games like the fan-made prequel to Bloodlines, with Prequel 2 currently in development. None of this was inevitable. Most games with Bloodlines issues did not get that kind of fan support, much less proceed to get it for 21 years. Whole fan bases didn't congregate around those games and celebrate them despite or perhaps because of their flaws. Most of those titles withered, died, and then faded into obscurity, maybe become an industry punchline about developer hubris and Midas touch syndrome, or worse, they killed long successful franchises. I'll grant you, none of those games were ahead of their time like Bloodlines was, or had Bloodlines' raw potential, but it was a community's love and support for this game is responsible for many, perhaps most of you, learning about it at all, and is the only reason that most of us can still play it to this day. Back then, the joy I felt in being immersed in this one-of-a-kind experience was surpassed only by the thrill of being in a community that also got and understood this game long before any cult status, because they understood what this game did for people. And in a sense, it was like they understood me during a formative period where that didn't always feel so common, and it sure wasn't taken for granted. I've never ceased to appreciate that or them, and it still hits that same way whenever I read or hear about someone doing something new to add more experience to my beloved Bloodlines. I can only imagine what the next 21 years will bring, and I can't wait to find out. But I have no doubt that we'll be playing it, some of us with our kids, maybe even your grandkids. But you know, speaking of playing Bloodlines, I've talked a good deal today about Bloodlines throughout the years and my initial experience. If you'll excuse me, I'm going to go celebrate the proper way and play some Bloodlines. Belated happy 21st birthday to Bloodlines, and a happy 21st anniversary, and so on, to all of the folks who played it way back when.